Before we open the files tonight, a very necessary warning. The narrative we're about to enter involves the violent death of a parent at the hands of a child. It deals with the grim realities of parricide, the corruption of domestic innocence, and the disturbingly cold mechanics of juvenile homicide. While the legal records regarding this case have been settled for years, the details remain some of the most unsettling in the history of Pennsylvania law. This content is intended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. This is the terrifying simplicity to the mind of a child. In the world of absolutes, the good and bad, yes and no, and now and never. But as adults, we operate in the gray areas. We understand that punishment is temporary, and that a restriction is for our own good. Also, that anger is a fleeting emotion that can be managed. But to an unformed mind, a restriction can feel like an annihilation. A denial can feel like a declaration of war. Tonight we travel the banks of the Susquehanna River to Duncannon, Pennsylvania, a small quiet borough that nestles in the Appalachian Mountains. This is a place of porches, pickup trucks, and generational families. But in the winter of 2007, inside a modest home on seemingly safe streets, the concept of family was dismantled in a single heartbeat. Now, this wasn't a case of who done it. We already know who held the gun. The horror of this case isn't the mystery of the perpetrator, but the mundanity of the motive. A father is dead, a mother is shattered, and an 11-year-old boy is in handcuffs. But why? This isn't a case of abuse, and this isn't a psychotic break, but this was all because of a video game. Tonight we examine the case of Clayton Dietz, a boy who traded his father's life for a moment of digital freedom. And I also have my lovely husband here with me to join us on this very tragic journey.
Very tragic and almost psychotic journey, indeed.
But before we fall into this case even further, because this is a 420 friendly channel, we are going to take our early video garden. If you have it, you can spark it. We only support you doing so, though, if it is legal in your state and you are of age to do so. Also, if you're in a controlled and safe environment, just as we are. So, in the name of justice, in the name of true crime, cheers. Apologies, it took a while. I use a glass tubing for gardening. If you know, you know. And no, not a pipe. Ooh. You know
Very
who?
beautiful vase.
Yes, very beautiful vase. Anyways. Now back to the actual crime at hand. Now, to understand the crime, you must understand the environment. Duncannon's not the place where people usually lock their doors out of fear from the neighbors. It's one of them knit-tight communities in Perry County. In 2007, the Diaz family lived a life that was, by all metrics, inviolable. Douglas Diaz, a 29-year-old man who was building a life. He's a father who stepped up. He and his wife Julian had adopted Clayton. Now, adoption is an act of deliberate love. It's a choice to bring a child into your home and say, "You're welcome here. You're part of the family now." By all counts, Douglas loved Clayton. He provided for him, he protected him, and the dynamic in the Diaz household was facing a thoroughly modern enemy, the screen. Clayton was described by those who knew him as a quiet boy, but one with a fierce, almost pathological attachment to his video games. In the mid 2000s, the landscape of childhood was shifting. The backyard was replaced by a console. And for Clayton, the digital world wasn't just a pastime, but it was his primary reality. When that reality was threatened, the boy didn't just react with a tantrum, he reacted with a very terrifying strategy. The date is January 23rd of 2007. It's a Tuesday, but not just any Tuesday. It's the week of Clayton's birthday. The house is filled with a residential energy of celebration, but as the evening sets in, the domestic routine takes over. Douglas Diaz is doing what fathers have done for generations. He's setting some boundaries. Clayton has been playing video games for far too long, and the glow of the television is the only light in his bedroom. Douglas steps into the room and he tells Clayton simply, hey, enough is enough. It's time to turn it off. It's time to go to bed. Now, in the mind of any rational adult, this is called parenting. It's a minor correction, but investigators believe that in that moment, something in Clayton's mind just snaps. Or, perhaps more terrifyingly, it didn't just snap, but it calcified. Clayton didn't scream, he didn't throw a controller against the wall, he didn't do what any Call of Duty lobby would have done, but he went to his room. He accepted the punishment on the surface. But as he sat in the dark of his own bedroom, the resentment began to curdle into something more lethal. He didn't want to sleep, he wanted to play. And he realized that the only thing standing between him and the console was the man sleeping in the next room. The layout of the Diaz home becomes the most critical piece of evidence in this story. The master bedroom, where Douglas and Julian slept, was connected to Clayton's room, where they linked it by a shared feature. A walk-in closet, a pass-through that is easy access between parents and a child. This architectural decision was designed mainly for safety. It was a design so a parent could quickly get to a child who was either crying from a nightmare or a physical threat. It was designed for comfort. But on this very night, it became a tactical advantage for someone with an ulterior motive. Somewhere in that master suite, there was a gun safe. Douglas Diaz was a responsible gun owner, and in that sense, he keeps all of his weapons locked away. But a lock is only a deterrent for if the key is hidden. And Clayton, with the observant eyes of any child, really, or a child who watches everything, knew exactly where the keys were. While his parents slept, while the house settled in the heavy silence of 1 in the morning, Clayton moved. He didn't sneak out of the house to run away like most kids did, and like I know all of you have. Why did y'all do that? He snuck into the room where his parents were vulnerable. He opened the drawer and he found the keys. He then proceeded to unlock the cabinet. He retrieved a .22 caliber revolver. A .22 is often dismissed as a small caliber. It is a varmint round. But at close range, physics takes over. A bullet doesn't need to be large to be fatal. It only needs to be placed correctly. Clayton took the weapon. He didn't hesitate. He didn't tremble. He walked through the connected space, the ghost in his own home, and he stood over that bed. The forensic reconstruction of the next few seconds is honestly truly revealing.
Quite harrowing.
Quite harrowing. Douglas Diaz was asleep. He was likely dreaming, his body in a state of total relaxation. He had absolutely no defense wounds. He had no warning at all. Clayton raised the revolver, he aimed it for his father's head, and he made the very conscious choice to pull the trigger. The sound of the gunshot inside the room wasn't like in the movies. It was a deafening, conclusive crack that overpressures the room. Jillian Diaz, sleeping right next to her husband, was jolted awake. Her brain trying to make sense of the sudden violence. It didn't register that a gunshot happened. She later then told police that she thought a light bulb had exploded, or she thought it was like a firecracker. She felt something wet and she heard a dripping sound. Confused in the dark, she reached out for her husband. She tried to wake him. But Douglas Diaz was sadly already gone. The bullet had entered through his wrist and traveled through, striking him right in the head. It was a chaotic, messy, but ultimately fatal shot. Julian turned a light on, and the horror of the reality came to focus. The blood, the silence of her husband, and standing there in the doorway was her at the time 10-year-old son. The interaction that followed is what really haunts the first responders of Perry County to this day. When a child witnesses violence, you'll expect hysteria. You expect tears. You expect them to go running to their mother. But Clayton Dietz did none of these things. According to the police, the boy looked at his mother and delivered the statement that was devoid of effect. He didn't say it was an accident. He didn't say I'm sorry, and he didn't say anything along those lines. He simply said, "I shot him. Daddy's dead." Julian, in an absolute state of shock, called 911. When Pennsylvania state troopers had arrived, they found a scene that defied their training. They had a dead body, a grieving widow, and a suspect who was barely tall enough to ride a roller coaster.
So he just like trying to go back to playing the game. Oh my god.
Yeah, so keep in mind, after he had killed his dad and after he told his mom that and all, he just went back to playing the game, I'm pretty sure.
That's not even pretty sure.
Like, I'm pretty sure. It doesn't necessarily say it in the file reports, but I'm guessing that's kind of what he was doing while, like, waiting for the troopers to come.
Wow.
Yeah.
God.
They took the weapon, they took the boy, and when they asked him why, the question that would plague the prosecution for years, his answer was terrifyingly simple. He was mad about the video games. He wanted to keep playing, and his father said no, so he removed the obstacle. This was a transactional murder. In Clayton's mind, the equation was balance. Father equals no, no father equals yes. The arrest of Clayton Dietz presented the Pennsylvania legal system, with an impossible dilemma. The crime was criminal homicide. The evidence was overwhelming, but the defendant was only 10 years old. Under Pennsylvania law, homicide is one of the few crimes where a juvenile can be automatically charged as an adult regardless of age. The prosecutors made a difficult decision to charge him as an adult. They looked at the premeditation and argued that this wasn't an impulsive act of a child, but this was a calculated execution of a killer. Clayton was handcuffed. He was put in a jumpsuit that was way too big for him, and he sat in a courtroom where his feet barely touched the ground. The defense naturally argued for the decertification of the case, moving it from adult court to juvenile court. They brought in psychiatrists. They argued that the 10-year-old brain doesn't understand the premise of death. They argued that to Clayton, death was like video games, a temporary state, a reset button. They argued that he didn't have the capacity to form malice in the legal sense. For months, the case hovered in limbo. The community of Duncannon was torn. Was this child a monster? Or was he a tragic victim of a brain that hadn't fully finished wiring itself? In the end, the system blinked. The prosecution and the offense reached an agreement. It was clear that sending a preteen to a maximum security adult penitentiary for life served no one. But simply letting him go wasn't possible.
How do you just let something like that go?
I have no idea.
Like, he just straight up killed his father in cold blood.
Clayton Dietz pleaded no contest to a charge of third-degree murder. The judge accepted the plea. The case was decertified to juvenile court. The sentence was intermediate. He would be held in a secure juvenile treatment facility until the age of 21.
21?
Yeah, now think about that for a second. A 10-year sentence for the life of a father. To the family, Douglas Diaz, it felt like a slap to the face. To the advocates of juvenile justice, it was a mercy. Clayton disappeared into the system. He grew up behind fences. He went through puberty and adolescence and young adulthood in the custody of the state. He was later released in 2018, a grown man with a new name and a sealed record. Somewhere out there. Yeah, no one can find him. He changed his name, and yeah.
Oh my god.
Now, somewhere out there, walking among us, is a boy who killed his father for a video game. The house in Duncannon has likely been sold. The blood's been scrubbed from the floorboards and life moves on. But the archive of Clayton Diaz remains open in our collective memory. Because it strikes at the very modern fear. That we invite technology into our homes to keep our children quiet. We use screens as pacifiers. But we rarely stop to ask what the blue light is doing to their empathy. We rarely ask if the constant cycle of kill, die, respond is eroding the barrier between fantasy and reality. Now, Douglas Diaz was a good father. He just set a natural boundary that most parents would. He did exactly what a parent's supposed to do. And sadly, he paid for it with his life. Now, as you turn off your device tonight, as you check on your own children sleeping in the room, ask yourself, how well do you know the thoughts that swirl in their heads when the lights go out? Because Douglas Diaz thought he knew, he thought he was safe, and he was wrong. But this is also a very, 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 large PSA as well. Please, please, just spend time with your kids and don't let them have access to the internet that young.
I'm still stuck on the... Yeah. How?
Now, this was High Frights. I hope everyone has a lovely night. Bye!